watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, lacrosse fans? Welcome to Goal Line Extended on the Lacrosse Flash Podcast Network. Today is Friday, July 16, and I'm your host, Ryan Hulsebos. Glad that you could join us as we get set to do some reflecting on the first half of the 2021 PLL season, as the regular season has just 2 more weekends, which means 3 more games for every team except for the Water Dogs and the Cannons, as they both played their second doubleheader last weekend. And then we'll be into the playoffs. We'll have the top 7 of the 8 teams competing for the 2021 championship, with the number 1 overall seed getting a bye through to the semifinals. We also have new information on the trade and waiver deadlines as we get closer to the end of the regular season and to the playoffs, and we'll get set for Sunday night's AllStar Game and discuss what became a very long injury report going into the All-Star break, which includes a couple notable All-Stars that we were expecting to see out in San Diego. All of that and more as we get settled in here for today's show. Let me welcome in Flash writer and analyst Jordan Johnson. Jordan, welcome back to GLE. How are we feeling on this Friday afternoon? All-Star Game set for Sunday night, and then probably most exciting and what we are going to get right into in a moment, the National Lacrosse League, box lacrosse, is officially back.
Feeling great, man. Middle of summer, all this lacrosse here at one time. Cannot complain. Weather's nice. Ton of lacrosse across the board. Tournaments, PLL, NLL coming back this winter. Let's have a day, buddy.
Absolutely. Hey, playoff lacrosse is coming back very soon, just over a month away. But as I said there off the top, and you said as well, very excited to have National Lacrosse League coming back in the next few months. As we've known for a while that December 3rd, December 4th start date was in place. But until now, that is really all we've known about the 2021-2022 season. Keywords until now, because on Wednesday morning, the NLL laid out its full schedule for opening weekend, which they are calling Faceoff Weekend, along with new conferences and a new and expanded playoff format. Jordan, let's start with those Faceoff Weekend matchups. Again, Faceoff Weekend is set for Friday, December 3rd and Saturday, December 4th, but we'll see 12 of the 14 teams in action, kicked off by the Colorado Mammoth going to San Diego to play the Seals, which is our only game that Friday night. Saturday, we'll see the Wings and Swarm play in Georgia, the Thunderbirds hosting the Rush in Halifax. The Roughnecks will go to Buffalo to play the Bandits in a rematch of the 2019 title game, which is our most recent title game. The Nighthawks play the Riptide, and then the Firewolves, in their first season since moving from New England to Albany, will head up to Hamilton, Ontario to play the Toronto Rock. Game times are all TBD, along with the rest of the NLL schedule, which we should be getting over the next few months, but exciting nonetheless to have an opening weekend slate. Jordan, which matchups stick out to you as the NLL opens up this 2021-2022 season?
Well, that first one right there, you said Colorado at San Diego. You talk about a team in the Seals who were teetering around 500 when the season ended, and I think has the real potential now coming in as an expansion team from 2018, I believe, kind of starting to hit their form with guys like Ferg and Stotts and even Connor Fields back in the mix. They're a team that I'm really interested to just see how they come out of the gate. I think they have the ability to be a playoff team, and so that's a team that I'm going to watch early on. Then the other matchup, the next night with the Wings at the Seals, I watch a lot of the Wings games, being that they are the closest team to me. I'm also interested on the Seals side just to see Lyle and Miles playing together again. That's going to be something fun to watch. So I can't wait to dive more into the NLL season, man.
Hey, that championship rematch between the Bandits and the Roughnecks, that sticks off the page to me as it just being the last title game that we had. The Wings and Swarm, as you mentioned there before, a ton of as us being more PLL followers, more field lacrosse guys, we will recognize a lot more names. The Mammoth and Seals as well. The Seals have a lot of recognizable names as well. But it's looking like a very exciting weekend of lacrosse. The new expansion franchise, the Panther City Lacrosse Club, and then the Vancouver Warriors. We will need to wait until week 2 before we get to see them start their 2021 campaigns. And then beyond this week 1 slate, we don't have much more information on the schedule or how many games each team will play, besides the fact that each team will play 9 regular season home games, which leads me to believe that there will also be 9 regular season away games, totaling an 18-game regular season. Again, we will fact check that over the coming weeks and months, so don't quote me on that, but very exciting nonetheless to have matchups to look forward to. Hopefully, we will get that full schedule very, very soon, but we also got new conference alignments, and how the playoffs will work will depend very heavily on how these conferences are aligned. A quick overview, if you have not gotten a chance to see them: the Eastern Conference will consist of 8 teams: the Firewolves, the Bandits, the Swarm, the Thunderbirds, the Riptide, the Wings, the Nighthawks, and the Rock. And then the Western Conference will consist of 6 teams: the Roughnecks, the Mammoth, the Seals, the Rush, the Warriors, as well as Panther City. And then it will be inferred that Las Vegas will be that 7th team next season. So just to help out there, even out those conferences. But then for the playoffs, the top 4 teams from the East and the top 3 teams from the West will automatically qualify, along with a wild card team that has the next best record. So either that 5th place East team or the 4th place West team, whichever team has the better record, will get the 8th and final spot in the NLL playoffs, which will consist of a single elimination round 1, 2 best-of-3 semifinal matchups, and then a best-of-3 final. So a very exciting format, more lacrosse with the best-of-3s, which is something that I think we would love to see implemented in the PLL in a few years, as it just adds more playoff games, more tight competition. It's not just one game. You're seeing another team then twice, possibly a third time. And Jordan, looking at the conference alignment, hopefully that will also make for even more competitive games for teams playing those in-conference games, especially towards we get to the end of the season with those playoff spots becoming, on the line.
Exactly. And I'm going to go right there to that, especially with that 8th spot not being tied to a particular conference, per se. It's just going to make it more competitive. And obviously, just splitting by East and West just makes it more easier to follow from a fan perspective, having it be by geography. So that's something that you look for when you're talking about attracting new fans who may be coming over from field, or just new fans who are looking at the NLL. And then you hit it right on the nose with the best of 3 series right there, with more games. The NLL is so competitive, and I feel like those games go by so quick. After each game, you feel like you just want a little bit more. You feel like just another quarter. So with the best of 3 series, I love that. You just get more lacrosse, and you can't go wrong with that.
It's interesting because for like the Western Conference, you could have your top 3 teams, but let's say number 4, number 5, and number 6 are all just right there. Like their records could be identical. It's like those 3 teams are fighting for that 8th spot. That 5th team in the East could be way out of the picture. It could be coming down to. It's just interesting how the conferences are aligned. Again, it just makes it more interesting as we get kind of like as we're going to get here to week 7 and 8 with the PLL. It just makes it all more interesting.
And I think this model too, with that, could be, if it works in the way that we hope it does, it could be used as a model for a league like the NBA, who struggles with sort of the top tier teams being in the West and the bottom tier being in the East, just for more competitive balance. I think that's what I love about that is it's going to create more competitive balance, per se. It's not just one conference is going to be more superior than the other. And so I think that's something to watch moving forward here in years to come, if this model can be used across all different sports.
Absolutely. We here at Flash are all very excited for the NLL to get its 2021-2022 season started the first weekend of December, and then we'll be providing updates on this show and on social media as we hear and learn more about the season's NLL schedule. Make sure to follow at Lacrosse Flash so that you don't miss any breaking news. But Jordan, we can't look too far ahead, as like we said before, we have a whole second half of the PLL season still in front of us, with the first half wrapping up this Sunday with the AllStar Game, and then I would say officially on Friday, August 6th, as that is the most recent date set by the league for the trade deadline. As back in April, the league announced in a social media graphic some of its deadlines. One of them was the trade deadline, that it would be sometime following week 6, which is the All-Star Weekend. We now have some clarity from the league's transaction page that it will be at 2 p.m. Eastern on Friday, August 6th. So all trades between teams will need to be made by that deadline ahead of week 7. And then in terms of adding players off the league's player pool, That deadline, the waiver deadline, will be on Monday, August 16, also at 2 p.m. Eastern. So that's the Monday following Week 8 in Albany, which is the final regular season weekend ahead of the playoffs. So coaches will have that one last opportunity to finalize their playoff rosters ahead of the quarterfinals in Salt Lake City the weekend of August 20 and 21. And then the only way to make a postseason change would be to make one due to an injury, where the lacrosse club with the injured player would need to make a request to the league to replace the player. That player would then become ineligible to return for the remainder of the playoffs, and the player signed to replace the injured player must be of the same position. So a goalie for a goalie, a face-off specialist for another face-off specialist, a pole for a pole, and so on and so forth. So finally, some clarity as we look ahead to the final 2 weekends of the regular season and to the playoffs. For everyone watching and listening, if you want to see the full explanations from the league along with some more information on the different roster designations, you can head on over to the league's transaction page. But Jordan, that August 6th trade deadline date, that is quickly approaching. We've seen a few teams like the Redwoods yesterday put out on social media that they might have something in the works. I wouldn't put it past Coach Nat, but we've only seen one trade since this season began. That was the trade that we got following Week 3 that saw Kevin Reisman reunite with his 2020 MLO team, the Cannons. Drew Simino and Chris Hogan get sent by the Cannons to the Whipsnakes in return. So a quiet season thus far on the trade front. With a week until that deadline, do you believe that we could see a trade or two? And if so, who's involved in it and what does it look like?
Honestly, in my honest opinion, do we see another trade? I don't know. But for the purposes of just for discussion and bringing it out there, there's one player I have been watching for a few weeks that I do think if there's a trade to be made, he could be involved, and that is Tucker Durkin with the Atlas. Listen, I know he's a vocal leader in that locker room, and his play has certainly been sort of up there where it is in usual years, but the Atlas have had Michael Rexroad emerge, prove he can be a number one. Cade Van Rathhorst, Craig Chick there, along with Newbold, who's starting to come into his old. Could Tucker Durkin be somebody who's expendable in the sense of, I hate to say that you're going to lose a lot, but you're not going to lose a lot with a guy like Tucker Durkin because you are in the locker room, but he could be a guy that's expendable if a team like potentially the Cannons or the Chaos is willing to give Ben Rubier a package that maybe keeps that Atlas core intact, but also allows him to continue the retool for years to come. And, I think Tucker Durkin to the Cannons could make a lot of sense. You could potentially have him be at close with Garlett and Keelty, and you could potentially move Brody up to LSM, which that could be a dangerous defense. And, I'm going to talk about the Cannons later here, but, I think the Cannons need sort of one big move to kind of push them back into the playoff race, because I think they're a team that's right there that can get hot. And so, could Durkin be that guy to kind of solidify things defensively? Because I think they're just about there offensively. If Rabel's hitting, Lyle's having his best game, Ryan Drenner, who seems to be one of the most underrated players in this league. So if they can make a big move defensively, they've already made that face-off move, getting back Riesman. But, a guy like Tucker Durkin could potentially help them kind of bring them back into that playoff race.
Absolutely. And you think about the Cannons, too. They have a handful of offensive weapons that I feel like you look like a guy like a Deemer Class, who's a veteran, a guy that you could move in a trade like that. I would imagine, as you're saying, try to continue that retool for the Atlas. Probably a draft pick would be included. But absolutely, a guy like Tucker Durkin. I mean, you mentioned Ryan Drenner kind of being an underrated player. I saw on Twitter somewhere this week, Craig Chick has been playing unbelievable.
Craig Chick, UMBC assistant. You didn't think I was gonna let that slide?
Got to get his name in there.
Yeah.
I saw somewhere where it's like, I think Lehigh, because he went to Lehigh. I think they tweet out like most underrated LSM, and I'm like, Craig Chick, he's just underrated player, really, in my opinion. But as you're saying, move a guy like Tucker Durkin, or even if you were to maybe take one of those other defensemen, if Rubier thinks that one of them are expendable, send them over. The Cannons could use that defensive help, as you're saying.
Here's a little outside the box trade, just purposes.
Shoot it at me. Look
at a guy like Dox Aiken.
Okay.
He hasn't got a lot of playing time, and the Atlas have been playing well with their transition guys. Could Jim Stagnita in the Whipsnakes at least make that call and see if Dox is available? because I think he'd fit in very well with the Whip Snakes, who desperately need a short stick D midi. But it's not. I think there's short stick D middies in the player pool that could help them. But if you take a guy like Dox, who could help them not only defensively, but we know what he can do offensively as well. And that's a team that's been who's been hurt, and you never know what could happen. Could you potentially trade a draft pick for him? I don't know if Ben Rubier would want to give him up so early just because he has so much potential. But if I'm Jim Stagnita, I at least make the call and see if you can swing a guy like him, because you can move him around now depending on your injuries and your depth this season. And he's somebody that you could hold on to, and he could be potentially a part of a core that you have for years to come. And if it's worth trading a draft pick for Dox, I would say Dox would be a first round pick in next year's draft, or would be the equivalent. So why not do a deal earlier rather than later, especially if, you see him, he's not getting as many runs as you'd like with the Atlas. I could see that being sort of a fit. It's outside the box. Will it happen? Probably not, but it's something to put out there.
Absolutely. I think the one thing with we're only saying there's only been one trade this season. I know you said it before. It's kind of like, I think before we even started recording, you said I coming in, it was like I thought there was going to be one trade. And now we got that one trade. So are we going to see another one? The restricted rosters, we didn't talk about it. I did throw in there, if you want to see some of the roster designations, you can head on over to the league's transaction page. But there is the restricted possibility where teams have been picking up players off other teams' restricted rosters, kind of like in a trade, but it's not a trade. It's you're just getting a free player that hasn't played, hasn't dressed at all this season. I think it's 3 weeks is the timetable there that you can pick up a restricted player. So we've seen that. I think that's kind of the replacement this year of the trades. It's kind of like, oh, you just wait for this guy to become available, you grab him. That's why we were very I think we were just surprised when we saw Chris Hogan included in that trade, because I think he was at that 3 week restricted. He was like in that timetable. So the Whip Snakes could have just added him really if they wanted to. Maybe that had to do with just the Whip Snakes at the time being up in first place. That could have been a possibility. That let's just bring him in a trade. But I like the Dox Aiken possibility here.
And before Whip Snake Nation comes at me, I know Matt Abbott is there, but I'm just saying, health wise, do we fully know who's going to be healthy offensively and defensively? So this is not taking away from Matt Abbott's value at all and what he brings to them. I'm saying simply health-wise, don't know who's going to be available, whatnot. It's an option. It's something to look at.
The Whip Snakes definitely have a lot of talent, but as we're saying, they are right now, if you look at the injury report, they are riddled by injuries. Mike Earhart is still he was on the injury report ahead of this All-Star break, but we saw Bryce Young playing a lot of LSM, and we saw the issues that kind of caused there in that Week 5 game for the Whip Snakes against the Redwoods. We I think Dan pointed out there on Tuesday's PLL Flash, Chris Hogan's out there playing as a little short stick defensive midi. He got ran by, as Dan pointed out, a couple times there in that game against the Redwoods. Matt Abbott didn't dress there in Week 5. Charlie Hayes is there, but Charlie Hayes, great defenseman. Jake Bernhardt's back on the injury report. So as you're saying, the Whip Snakes could use some short stick defensive midi help. Dox Aiken could be that possibility. But as you said there before, does Ben Rubier want to part ways there with his second round, or I should say one of his second round selections there in this past draft? We will see. But despite only seeing one trade thus far this season, I think we could see some teams make some moves here over the next week. You point out the Atlas, the Whip Snakes, the Cannons. I think the Chaos could definitely use some help on the defensive end in front of Blaze Reardon. The Chrome have also been battling injuries all season, especially on that defensive end. So if they can't get those guys healthy over the next week, Sudan might be able to make a move to grab someone ahead of his team's playoff push. And then the other 6 teams, as they fight for seeding, some of them for that number 1 seed, just thinking about it that way, a significant move could play a huge difference or could be very detrimental. So those are some things that these head coaches will need to think about as they head into the final 2 weekends of the regular season, and we'll see how they each handle this deadline. As again, we have 2 weekends remaining in the regular season, following the All-Star break, and then those 2 weekends separated by a bye week, and we should have a pretty exciting race to see who qualifies for that number 1 overall seed, which gets a free pass through to the semifinals. Right now, going into week 7, we have 4 teams currently at 4 wins, 3 of them at 4-2 with 3 games left to play. That would be the Redwoods, the Atlas, and the Whipsnakes, with goal differential separating them in that order. The Water Dogs follow behind at 4-3. However, like we discussed on Tuesday's PLL Flash, the PLL, has the Water Dogs in second place, honoring the wins first and then the score differential in making up the standings rather than the winning percentage and then the score differential. So kind of confusing, little like the best explanation there that I can give. But the Archers, they're in 5th place at 3-3. The Chrome and Chaos hold the final 2 spots at 2-4, and then the Cannons, currently the odd man out in our 7-team playoff field, sit in 8th place at 2-5 with 2 games left to play. Mathematically, every team is still alive and every team is still in contention for that number 1 spot. But realistically, it looks like it will come down to the Redwoods, the Water Dogs, the Atlas. I would say the Archers, and then we could also add on the Whipsnakes as well. But I think that negative goal differential might hurt the Whipsnakes in that regard, as they currently sit at -7. On the other hand, despite being a full game back, the Archers plus 22 goal differential keeps them in contention, I'd imagine, until they are mathematically eliminated wins and losses wise from that top spot. But week 7 should tell us a lot. The Redwoods will play the Archers. They'll either be tied at 4-3 or separated by 2 games heading into a decisive week 8 where they both play 2 games. The Water Dogs will play the Whipsnakes, and then the Whipsnakes will also play twice in week 8. And then the Atlas play 2 times in week 7 against Chrome on Friday and against the Cannons on Sunday. So 2 teams towards the bottom of the table. 2 wins should put the Atlas in a good spot heading into the final week of the regular season to try to get that top spot. But Jordan, looking at it right now ahead of this All-Star break, with what we've seen through the first 5 weekends and along with all that information that I just threw at you, who do you like as the team to secure that top spot in the first round bye?
I really love the Redwoods right now. And I say this because they're a team who maybe hasn't necessarily played up to their standard yet. And that's not a bad thing, because you look at their past 2 wins, a gritty win against the Water Dogs in which they had to go outshoot them. And then you look at the win against the Whipsnakes where their defense was on point. And you bring those 2 things combined, have them all firing on all cylinders coming back out of the All-Star break. They're a team that I'm really watching that I look at right now and say they could win out and grab that number 1 spot. And they could get some goal differential on some of these teams too, because I think, like you said, kind of 2 through 7, those games are going to be so close. I think the Redwoods, if they hit their stride like I think they are, they have a chance to not only win out but get some of that goal differential on these teams. And so compared to other teams where maybe like a team like the Water Dogs, have we seen them play their best? Maybe, maybe not. Team like the Archers, we know what they are at their best, but do we know what they are at their lowest? Maybe, maybe not. There's kind of teams that are hanging around where, a team like the Redwoods, we haven't really seen them at their best yet, and I think that their best is yet to come. And so that's a team that I think could get the number 1 spot.
The Redwoods absolutely a chance to win out, as you're saying. They will have a very tough schedule, though, coming up. I believe the Archers in week 7, if I can recall here. Archers week 7, Chaos week 8, as well as the Whipsnakes week 8. I think it's in actually a different order. I think it's Archers week 7, then the Whipsnakes on that Friday, then the Sunday would be the Chaos. But absolutely the Whipsnakes, or the Redwoods, a chance here, as you're saying, might not be playing their best lacrosse. They started off really well in week 1, took kind of a dip, but then right back up to what we expected of them this season. I would say throw another team in there. The Archers. I really like the Archers here coming up. I have a bold prediction here coming up in a little bit, but definitely the Redwoods looking like they've been playing their best lacrosse. Let's look at the bottom of the table, though. We have the Chrome at 2-6 with a -9 score differential in 6th place. The Chaos currently hold the final playoff spot, also at 2-6, but with a -12 scoring differential. And then the Cannons on the outside looking in trail them both by half a game with a -12 score differential. We could also add in the Archers to this conversation. They are 3-3 and have a very tough upcoming schedule with the Redwoods in week 7 and then the Chaos and Whipsnakes in week 8. But again, I think their score differential puts them in a very good spot. But Jordan, of those really 3 teams fighting for those final 2 spots with 2 weeks to play. Who do you think continues on to Salt Lake City to play in the quarterfinals?
Okay, this is going to be somewhat bold here, but I have the Chrome as my 6th seed and the Cannons
Okay.
as my 7th seed. This Chaos team I'm very much worried about. Defensively, we don't know how long Jack Rowlett's going to be out for that reason, the injuries and whatnot. Even before that, I was worried about them defensively, as everyone knows by now. Blaze sees way too many shots. Offensively, they're so up and down. And could they get the Canadian influence back? Could they bring it? A guy like Tanner Cook has been on the restricted roster. Will we see Curtis Dixon at all this year? I don't know. And frankly, even if we do, it takes time. It takes guys time to adjust. I like the move of bringing in Bryce Wasserman just to bring in a different element, but I don't know if they have enough time to sort of get right on all of these fronts. And that's a team that I'm worried. I hate to say this. I frankly don't know with their schedule coming up. I don't know if they're going to win another game this year. Now they're probably going to shop me, see this all over social, and go wet out. But as I'm looking at it right now, July 16th at the AllStar break, that's a team I'm very much worried about. We talked about earlier with the Cannons sort of starting with that game against the Archers, sort of find themselves. You get those 2-man games between Rabel and Lyle, a guy like Stephen Rafis who you feel like can do it all. You get potentially another piece on defense to kind of put it all together. And if Riesman comes into his own, or even they figure out a 2 face-off guy system with potentially Riesman, Peyton Smith, that's a Cannons team that's dangerous. And I think the Chrome are always going to be in it with Heacock and then John Galloway in goal. And then even if Galloway struggles, they always have Sean Scanoni there to go to. And I think the Chrome are just a team you can never count out.
We're going to see that matchup, the Chaos and Chrome, there in Week 7. That's going to be the Sunday game. So, as I said there on the PLL Flash on Tuesday, the Chrome kind of controlling their own destiny. They're going to have the Atlas in Week 7, followed by the Chaos in Week 7, and then the Cannon. So, the Chrome, they're in a good spot. So, as long as the Chrome win, they should be good. As we're saying, the Chaos, they have a little bit of a tougher schedule because they're going to have the Chrome there in Week 7. But Week 8, they've got the Archers there on the Friday, followed by the Redwoods. So not a very welcoming schedule coming up there for the Chaos. You have the Chaos as your odd team out. I think I'm going to agree with you there because looking at the Cannons as well, they have the Atlas, which is obviously a tough matchup. But then they have the Chrome. So the Cannons as well having that opportunity to kind of control their own destiny. I liked how Lyle Thompson said it in his post-game presser there on Sunday, this past Sunday. Every game at this point there for the Cannons is a playoff game. That's how they're treating it. And with how tight the standings are right now, that can really be said about all 8 teams. Some obviously more than others. Obviously the Cannons, Chrome, Chaos, they're more in a tough spot compared to those teams up at the top. But after Week 7, we should have a better idea of the playoff implications there ahead of Week 8. So something to watch heading into Colorado Springs in 2 weeks. And then obviously we'll be looking ahead to that ahead of Week 8. And Jordan, before I let you go, we have an All-Star Game and Skills Challenge to look forward to on Sunday night. I don't think we have I don't think we know for certain who will be competing in the Skills Challenge yet, something that the league will probably announce sometime between now and Sunday. But we have the team rosters. That was unfortunately, though, hit hard by injuries following Week 5 as the injury report was released. And Jordan, as you and many others said, looking more like a CVS receipt than an injury report. But we do have a lot of names there that were already on that list, including Jack Concannon, Michael Sowers, Matt Rambo, Drew Snyder. A couple Chaos players were already on this injured list as well. But we also have a handful of guys that were supposed to play in Sunday night's All-Star Game, which include Paul Rabel, Lyle Thompson, Brody Merrill from the Cannons, Blaze Reardon, who was an All-Star Game captain from the Chaos. He will not play. Will Hollis was originally the only Chrome player. He's now replaced by Colin Heacock due to an injury. And then a handful of Whipsnakes were named All-Stars, but either picked up an injury or was already on that report. But definitely interesting to see all those injuries pop up. Does make sense as we are in the 2-week break. A lot of guys probably looking to take this time to recover from any nagging injury, but you look at the guys injured have already been replaced by some top-level talent. Most of them guys that we would probably have expected to see be all-stars to begin with, but that's besides the point. But, Jordan, you look at these two rosters. I've been listing off a ton of stuff so far on this show, so I won't list off both of these rosters in full. Everyone watching and listening, you can check them out on the league's social media accounts. But you look at these two rosters. Who are you most excited to see paired in playing together, whether it's on the offensive end or the defensive side?
So before Zed backed out, I was really looking forward to watching him play with Lyle just for the purity and the spirit of the game. But now that we look at it, the Redwoods offense playing together in an all-star game, that's going to be fun to watch. We have pretty much the Redwoods offense and the Archers offense with the bunk bed boys sort of all playing together. And then you talk about the Archers defense, too. He gets to play together with Hasek, Rat, and Dominique Alexander. So that's going to be fun to watch. With all-star games, with so many guys backing out, too, some of those pairings kind of went away, It was going to be fun to see Rabel play with his old Atlas teammates. I believe Rabel and Kyle Harrison were supposed to be on the same team. If I had that,
they're on different teams.
They're on different teams.
Yeah,
I got that wrong, but that would have been cool to put on the same team.
That would have been really, really cool to watch.
And Kyle Harrison's last year. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to just some of these teams playing together. I'm interested to see who the coaching staffs are too in the All-Star game, which haven't been announced yet. And I was looking forward to seeing a guy like Rambo and Blaze. If Blaze was going to play offense, have you been hurt again? Things, little gimmicks like that. Could we see some shorty pick up a pole? That's what I'm really gonna. Just the gimmicky things like, are we going to see another around the pole or around the world? Well, around the world goal, things like that. How many
plays?
How many 2-pointers get attempted here? Because there's not going to be much defense played in an all-star game. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. Rather than just pairings and guys playing together, I'm looking forward just to seeing who goes for another air gate, who makes that 6 save, That's what I'm really going to be just watching out for is who makes Sports Center, or how many times does Lacrosse and the PLL get on Sports Center from the All-Star game? Put a little over-under on that.
We're hoping a lot. What would you, if you were to send over-under there, what do we send it at?
Just say 2. I think there'll be 2 good
2.5. 2.5.
2.5.
2.5.
Yeah, 2.5. I'll take the under. I think it'll be 2 spot on.
All right. I'll go over. I'm going to say we get at least 3 flashy plays here from this All-Star game that make the Sports Center top 10.
Fair.
I'm really excited to see a men's team, so the adversaries, their defense, because we're gonna have Tucker Durkin, Garrett Epple, and Eddie Glazner. Those are the 3 starters. Then you throw Graham Hasek in as a reserve. So some combination of those 3 guys. Graham Hasek could even pick up a short stick if you really want him. So you have Scott Ratliff running at LSM, and then Zach Goodrich as your short stick. Zach Courier, your other short stick defensive midi running in transition. I think some combination of those guys making up a 6-man defensive unit would be really, really interesting to see. And then obviously, for Grant Amen's team, it's pretty much his Archers offense. Add in Jeff T, add in a guy like Brian Costabile, add in a Mikey Schlosser there, Romar Dennis. So we'll see. But definitely excited to see that defense, how they kind of come together in this short time. Because obviously it's 2 Archers guys, Ratliff and Hasek. You're going to have 2 Redwoods guys and Epple.
And if the league does not get Mikey Schlosser in that fastest player competition, they are cheating all of us out of the show.
Again,
so
we don't know. We don't know.
Do the dang thing and put Mikey in that. I'm just saying, for all of our entertainment, do that.
Let's look at it right now. I got the rosters pulled up. I don't know if you do as well. Who do we think would be guys to kind of compete in these competitions? So the one with let's start with the fastest player. You're saying Mikey Schlosser.
Mikey Schlosser. Drenner is sneaky fast.
Drenner's sneaky fast?
Yeah, Drenner's sneaky fast at Towson. So is Goodrich too. Good, because Goodrich went both ways.
How about a guy like Danny Logan?
He's a little bit of a bigger guy.
If he has great speed? I mean,
It's a
we
little
watched.
bit of a big Romar could sneak up on some people too because Romar's got that quick twitch.
Fastest shot.
Obvious, fastest shot. Obviously, Jared Newman's going to be back
He's
there.
the reigning fastest shot champion. We
Think
could
you
probably toss in.
think you probably toss in Zach Courier and see what he can do.
Oh yeah.
A lot. It's really going to see a lot of polls. I think Rat would do well. In that.
It's
Yeah,
interesting
I
though
don't
because we
know
don't see
too.
many of these guys making the field.
If guys aren't playing, like I would love to see Rabel in that fastest shot competition because he's going to be there. Even if he doesn't play in the game necessarily, who's to say that even if he's nicked up a little bit, that he can't go shoot 110?
Yeah, very interesting. What were the other? I'm trying to remember what the other competitions were from year one in
The
2019.
skills challenge. Who got someone got Ryder Garnsey got robbed of that. I think Costaville would do well in the skills challenge.
Skills challenge, yes, for the coolest or shot or whatever, the niftiest shot that they did.
Yeah, the trick shot. First of all, Ryder Garnsey should have won that in that 2019. The fact that he didn't get past that first round was kind of whack.
How about Jeff Teat?
Jeff Teat would do well in that too. I'd love to see Kyle Harrison do some sort of basketball shot for his last one, just to kind of give it a last go around, just to see it, another jump shot. Maybe he does a jump shot through a basketball hoop or something, takes what Ryder Garnsey did and throws his jumper on there. That would be something interesting to watch.
My two guys, Jeff Teat, and then I just think Miles Jones with his athleticism could come up with something cool. That's my two guys right there.
And creativity too. Miles Jones is a very creative individual. So he would definitely put on a show at that.
We are looking forward to the AllStar Game and Skills Challenge. The AllStar Game will start the evening at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBCSN and on Peacock, with the Skills Challenge to follow at 9:30 exclusively on Peacock. And Jordan, one last thing before we finish up today. The quote-unquote first half of the season is behind us. We're looking ahead to the final 2 weekends of the PLL regular season. Give me a bold prediction here for what we might see over these next few weeks ahead of the playoffs.
Bold prediction here. The Whip Snakes are going to go to the semifinals of the playoffs, but they're going to be doing that with some sort of a two-goalie system. Both guys, Bernlohr and Phipps. Bernlohr struggled for the past few games. Phipps came in against the Woods. His first game had his fair share, had like 3 saves, which is good. Kind of struggled a little bit. The Woods were hot. Both guys are pros and have sort of played in that two-goalie system before. If you remember, with Bernlohr doing that sort of with Scott Rogers when the Machine went to the championship a few years ago. And then Phipps has done it in his time with the Bayhawks when they used to do that with Nico Amato, and they won a championship doing that, as a matter of fact. So both guys would take it well, and I think if they're a team that in goal, they could just go with the hot guy each week and still continue to win games here. So that's sort of my bold prediction is that the Whips are going to implement a two-goalie system.
Okay. Yeah, no, Kyle Bernlohr has struggled here over the last 2 game weekends there for the Whip Snakes. Against the Archers there in week 4, he only had 4 saves in the entire game despite the win. And then he was pulled last week at halftime, but only had 6 up to that point. So 10 saves there over a game and a half, so 6 quarters. So yeah, I could definitely see we've seen the Archers already in the PLL. They're really the only team so far in the last couple seasons in the PLL to utilize that two-goalie system. As you're saying, we could see the Whip Snakes do it here over this back half of the PLL season. Here's my bold prediction. I said before that I think the Archers with their plus 22 score differential are in a really advantageous spot First, I think the Archers beat the Redwoods in week 7, which they would then add whatever the difference is onto that 22. I'd say they beat the Chaos there in that first game in week 8 as well, add to that differential too. And then on the other side, I say the Whipsnakes beat the War Dogs in week 7 and then lose to the Redwoods in week 8. Then the Atlas lose one game over their final 3. Let's say it's to the Water Dogs in week 8 as well. If that all happens or something very, very similar to that, I was trying to brainstorm some other possibilities, but it got a little too confusing. But that would put the Atlas at 6-3, the Water Dogs at 5-4, and the Archers, Redwoods, and Whipsnakes all at 5-3, with Sunday, August 15, the last day of the regular season, to decide who gets the number 1 spot and the remaining seeding. And on that day, we'll see the Chaos and Redwoods followed by the Archers and Whipsnakes. And then depending on who wins, we'll then wait and see how the score differential shakes out. That was probably hard to follow a little bit, but long story short, somehow, with what is right now a plus 22 score differential, the Archers find a way to get that number 1 seed. Obviously, they'd probably have to win out, but that is my bold prediction, Jordan. What do you think? Archers find a way to get that number 1 spot.
I still think the Redwoods are, but I can see them getting the 2 seed. I don't think you're too far off here. I'm just going to throw another one that popped into my head here. Kansas are going to win a playoff game because talk about that number 1 seed getting a bye. So potentially who could be in that number 2 seed, whether it's the Woods, the Archers, the Water Dogs, the Atlas. If they draw a matchup like the Atlas in that playoff game, I think that experience of Lyle, Rabel, those vets winning a playoff game could really take over. And as you mentioned too, you alluded to Lyle's interview where he said every game is going to be a playoff game for them from here on out. Like I said, I think the Kansas are going to sneak into the playoffs, and I really could see them winning a playoff game, especially depending on who is that 2 seed. You know, especially if it's a team like the Water Dogs, who would they be seeing for a 3rd time here? You know, they always say 3rd time's a charm. Or if they potentially see the Atlas again, I could see them winning a playoff game.
Definitely there for those bottom 2 spots for the 6 and 7 seed for the playoffs. I think we're in agreement that the Chaos would be the team on the outside looking in. And then at the top, I think we'd be looking at a Redwoods, Atlas, and Archers kind of representing in whatever order that top 3, just given the Archers score differential and the fact that they play the Redwoods and the Whipsnakes coming up. So they'll have one last chance to kind of make that push. Redwoods in the same boat because they'll play the Archers and the Whipsnakes, so they'll have that opportunity as well. We didn't talk about it before. I probably should have said it when we were talking about the number 1 seed, but the Atlas have a very, very I wouldn't say easy schedule, but we're going to see the Atlas in week 7 play the Chrome on Friday and then the Cannons on Sunday, and then in week 8 they will play the Water Dogs. So the Atlas kind of having the quote unquote, we could say, easiest schedule here over the last 2 weekends of the season. I think they're in a really good spot to try to get that number 1 seed. If not, they could probably place there at 2 or 3, which, as you're saying, if the Cannons can get that 7th spot, if the Atlas are there at 2, we could be in line for an upset there by the Cannons.
Yes, sir.
Very exciting stuff. We're very excited to see how the final 2 weekends of the season shake out. And like I said before, after week 7, we'll have a much better idea of how everything could look. Hopefully it follows my bold prediction here, though, as well as yours. And we will see over these next 2 weekends how that all shakes out. But Jordan, I want to thank you for joining me today as we reflect on what was a little more than the first half of the season, as we have 2 more regular season weekends to go before the playoffs. And that is going to do it for today's show. I want to thank you all for watching and or listening. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe to Goal Line Extended on YouTube and hit that notification bell so that you get notified of future shows. You can also follow along on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All of the links that you will need will be in the description of the video or podcast that you are watching or listening to right now. And make sure to head on over to lacrosseflash.com. You can check out all of our content recapping last weekend's games, which will include our weekly power rankings, Dan Aresti's takeaways, Jordan's stars of the week, and Noah Lanz's hot and cold segment. Make sure to check all of that out, as we'll have very little content coming out over the next week or so over this All-Star break, and then we'll be back ahead of week 7 in Colorado Springs. And speaking of content, a little programming update for our video and audio content here at Lacrosse Flash. We will not have a PLL Flash over the next 2 weeks. We'll be back Tuesday, August 2nd after Week 7. So if you haven't already, check out this week's show recapping Week 5 with Dan Arestia, Austin Owens, and myself. We will also not have a new episode of this show, Goal Line Extended, next Friday. We'll be back the following week ahead of Week 7 to look ahead to the matchups out in Colorado, with all of them, as we talked about before, holding very important playoff implications. So make sure to like, follow, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of it. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the All-Star Game Skills Challenge and the ensuing break, and we will talk to you in 2 weeks. Cheers.
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at GL Extended, and subscribe to the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets. You can find Lacrosse Flash on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and online at lacrosseflash.com.